Hello again, everyone. It's great seeing you again, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather, 23rd day of November 2020. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. Next storm coming in to the west coast. So winter storm warnings back in effect. St. Lawrence Island and the Seward Peninsula. Winter weather advisories out for the Yukon Delta and lower Yukon River Valley area, with winter storm warning also out for the Galena area. And then along the Alaska Range, that's a high wind warning that's out for tonight through tomorrow, Monday night and Tuesday. And that's for strong winds out of the south-southeast and 45 miles per hour sustained, with gusts as high as 80 miles per hour. And moving on to the northwest coast there, winter storm warning out there as well. Noatak Valley, Kotzebue Sound, Selawik, and again, all of the Seward Peninsula. And that's for anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of snow. Some areas could have as much as 11 inches. In the case of St. Lawrence Island, possibly Yukon Delta, could see some freezing rain in with that too. And also some gusty winds, snow and blowing snow, especially the Seward Peninsula and up along the northwest coast there and a ways inland. And let's see, I left one out there. Advisory west of Haines along the Haines Highway up to, I think, Skagway. That's a winter weather advisory out until 9 p.m. this evening. And that's for total snowfall to be about 3 to 5 inches. And now moving on to satellite imagery, you can see the front pushing rapidly eastward there, into almost making landfall on the north coast of the Panhandle, probably currently is right now, with that spreading gusty winds and rain and snow in the north, rain in the south across the Panhandle. Low center there east of Kodiak Island, that had brought pretty strong winds to some areas earlier today. For example, let's see, 80 mile per hour wind gusts, peak wind gusts at Amatuli Island in the Barren Islands, while King Cove late last night had winds gust to 84 miles per hour to the northwest, and that whole band of strong northwest winds is shifting eastward there into Bristol Bay, the eastern Alaska Peninsula, and will begin to bear down Kodiak Island. And then you can see out to the west, the next strong system there already pushing strong winds back into the central Aleutians, with AKwx reporting winds gusting 66 miles per hour this afternoon, with rain, and Atka up to 50 miles an hour. And also winds are on the increase there over the Pribilofs, with rain as well as warmer air rides in on those southerly winds. Otherwise, narrow band of high pressure there east of over the eastern Bering Sea coming into the southwest interior. And we'll see that today it's roughly right into the southwest coast there, with lighter winds up over the southwest interior and dry conditions, variably cloudy skies northward to the the upper Yukon Valley to the Arctic coast. A few snow showers on the western Arctic coast there. Kivalina maybe to Point Hope, but nothing significant. Big system there in the strong front there coming into the southeast coast. Winds gusting 40 to 60 miles an hour, with increasing precipitation as well. Let's see, Ketchikan had just under an inch in the 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Petersburg about a half an inch. And then Juneau had had about a third of an inch of rain, with winds gusting to 40 miles per hour there. And then Yakutat just under an inch of precipitation, and lighter precipitation amounts to the west. The exception being Seldovia had about half an inch of rainfall today. And also Kodiak Island had some rain, but it was less than half an inch, and those winds on the increase. And we'll see out there to the west that front and the tight gradient, good southwest flow pulling rain into the central Aleutians, with again those winds approaching 70 miles an hour in gusts for the AKwx area. And we'll see tonight that front should reach Amchitka by about 4 a.m. tonight, with a low center 958 millibars tracking east to just southwest of St. Matthew Island. But that puts a very tight pressure field up along the southwest coast, northern Bering Sea. So the winter storm warnings, St. Lawrence Island, again, some of that moisture will be mixed with freezing rain there. And that could extend down into the Yukon Delta, but snow and blowing snow inland areas, Seward Peninsula, and high pressure, light winds. The whole ridge shifts eastward as that low slides down to just off the central coast of the Panhandle tonight. That's going to keep it windy and wet, especially over the southern Panhandle, but the whole system gradually, slowly weakening. Then you can see up in the north dry and mostly clear skies occurring And moving ahead to tomorrow, that front pushes right up to the southwest coast and the gradient inland. So snow and blowing snow trending toward wetter conditions with warming temperatures there. But at some point, areas along and north of the Yukon River, the lower Yukon River Valley area, we'll see snow and blowing snow, but it'll start to mix with rain as the warmer air moves in. But that probably won't happen at least through tomorrow for the Seward Peninsula and the Nulato Hills area up into the Selawik Valley. And look for blowing snow and strong winds to increase along the northwest coast. Could see gusts again, maybe 60 to 70 miles per hour in the normally windier areas up there. By contrast, the eastern part of the state sitting under high pressure with light winds and just a few clouds, with generally cloudy skies, a lot of moisture coming northward there on the western side of that ridge. So cloudy skies from Kodiak Island, increasing clouds south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, right up into the Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley areas, but mostly clear for the Copper River Basin to the eastern North Gulf Coast. And that low center dropping slowly southeastward, continuing to slowly weaken. Moves to west of the Queen Charlottes. That'll keep periods of rain in over the southern panhandle and become more of a mixed rain or snow shower condition in the central areas, drying out Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay over toward Yakutat with maybe some possible clearing. Otherwise, out over the Aleutians, mixed rain and snow showers will be kind of scattered across the area there with the winds not too bad, and more numerous rain and snow showers into areas like the Pribilof Islands. And let's see, for Wednesday, that front elongates eastward there, and the weak low develops right on the frontal boundary, comes up in toward the Kenai Peninsula. So a mixture of precipitation with gusty winds, especially the eastern North Gulf Coast, rain, Prince William Sound, and southern eastern Kenai Peninsula, mixture of precipitation for Cook Inlet up into the Madawaska-Susitna Valley. And then from the Alaska Range northwestward up along the northwest coast, mostly in the form of snow. Rain and snow showers over the Aleutians become mostly snow out over the western Bering and western Aleutians. And for lows tonight, anywhere from 5 to 15 below central and eastern interior north of the Alaska Range to single numbers in teens for south central Alaska to mid-20s out along the coast. Mid-20s northern panhandle, upper 30s south and along the coast. Same thing for the Alaska Peninsula. And for highs, tomorrow afternoon, single numbers eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and then to upper 20s over toward Cape Lisburne, and mid-30s there for the Seward Peninsula, like Nome, high 35, and almost 40 St. Lawrence Island. We will see 40 along the southwest coast, mid to upper 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid-40s Kodiak Island, mid to upper 20s south central Alaska, with lower to mid-30s in the northern panhandle to lower to mid-40s in the south. And then for the lows, Wednesday morning, really not too bad, 5 to 15 below eastern interior areas. Again, mild southerly flow keeps it a shade above freezing for Bristol Bay and along the southwest coast and Alaska Peninsula. And then for the panhandle, lows 20s to mid-30s and teens for south central Alaska, maybe 5 to 10 Susitna Valley, 10 below Copper River Basin. That'll be followed by highs generally in the 20s and in the teens in the Tanana Valley and 40s in the panhandle, especially the southern areas, upper 40s for Kodiak Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Starting with the first flying weather graphic, Tuesday morning, good VFR, northern interior, and then we pick up some marginal VFR there just south of the Yukon River in the flats, and on down into the mid and upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country into the northeastern Copper River Basin, and VFR, south central Alaska, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, a little bit of marginal stuff down toward Sitkinak, and marginal for the Panhandle with some IFR lingering over toward Stewart and Hyder. Band of IFR with that next active front pushing into the eastern Bering and actually to the IFR into the Yukon Delta, western Norton Sound, western Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island southward across the Pribilofs to Atka. And then for the afternoon, we'll see that kind of rotates in a little bit better pushed eastward in the southern portion there than in the northern areas. But IFR now from the Bering Strait, southern Seward Peninsula, Yukon Delta, up to the Kuskokwim Mountains just about, and then the central western Kuskokwim Delta down to the Alaska Peninsula. And marginal VFR gives way to VFR there, northeast Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. All of the central eastern interior Right up to the Arctic coast, VFR. A little patch of marginal VFR there around Yakutat and northern Panhandle becoming VFR, I'm sorry. Marginal to the south. Bering Sea Aleutians, marginal VFR. And for Wednesday morning, that whole band of moisture in the front rotates up into Kodiak Island, covers Bristol Bay, all IFR, right up across Kuskokwim Valley, Norton Sound, southern and central Seward Peninsula to the Bering Strait, and also from about roughly Kivalina, Red Dog, IFR in the northwest coast up to Point Hope and Cape Lisburne right on the edge. Otherwise, the Arctic coast, pretty good, mostly VFR. And same for the North Slope, Central Eastern Interior, VFR. Eastern North Gulf Coast, VFR in the Panhandle, same thing. IFR showing up there with that increasing southeasterly flow, so conditions coming down for the southern Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound. Marginal VFR working up the western Cook Inlet area. And for the afternoon, IFR across Cook Inlet, and that area of moisture pushes IFR eastward along the North Gulf Coast to past Yakutat, marginal VFR into Elfin Cove, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, VFR Juneau southward there to Dixon Entrance, some VFR also over Bristol Bay and south of the Alaska Peninsula. But say for west of Sand Point, westward to Shimianatu, all marginal, Bering Sea, all marginal, IFR up extending from southeast to northwest from Cook Inlet there right along the northwest coast. And for passes, Anatuvik VFR, same thing for Adigan, VFR flying. In fact, all passes for the Brooks Range and Alaska Range will be VFR for tomorrow. Windy, Isabel, Mintasta looking really good. Tanita VFR, Portage also VFR, and Chilkoot and White VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet there from roughly Elfin Cove and then angling southeastward there to just east of, say, Ketchikan and Annette, Metlakatla, those areas. And then kind of well south there of the western Gulf of Alaska, 6,000 feet with the next front and southerly flow, warm southerly flow, 6,000 feet the Alaska Peninsula, 2,000 feet almost to St. Lawrence Island, but not quite. Icing areas of considerable moderate and a narrow band there from the Alaska Peninsula northward to the Yukon Delta coast and then possibly in the southern Seward Peninsula. Then another band of mixed icing, less significant there over the central Bering to Adak and Atka back to Shimia, and some icing, mixed icing there for the southern southeast coast, tapering off up to the north. And for the jet stream, ridging coming eastward here with northwest flow now diminishing and dropping into the Gulf 85 to 100 knots. Upper level low there, southern Panhandle, and another one there up over the Mackenzie River Bay area. And low pressure far western Bering, so south to north flow 100 to 125 knots, and at 9,000 feet 75 to 85 knots between the high over Susitna Valley and the low there over the northwest Bering. And at 3,000 feet, 65 or 55 to 80 knot winds from south to north, and that translates into severe turbulence, likely St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula, northwest coast, with widespread moderate chop there from the western Arctic coast through the western interior, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, all of the Aleutians, and areas of the Panhandle could see some mechanical turbulence of the moderate variety below 7,000 feet.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Toman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks, Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at coastal water forecast, we've got gale warnings along the coast, varying directions there. Northeast 35 knots on the south coast, central coast, southeast 35 knots, and then northeast 35 knots on the north coast, and then up there toward Yakutat, west-northwest at about 20. But seas running anywhere from 25 to 32 feet, highest in the south. Inside waters, Clarence Strait, gale warnings tomorrow, southeast 35 knots, seas 13 feet. And for Stevens Passage, northeast winds 20 knots with gusts to 35 knots, and small craft advisories for Lynn Canal, northerlies at 25 knots with 5-foot seas. And moving on to Wednesday, south 25 knots for the south coast, and then south to southeast 30 to 35 knots up there in the north with seas at about 14 feet and 15 feet south. Otherwise, Clarence Strait down to 15 knots out of the east. South 20, gust 40 knots for Stevens Passage, and then light northerlies at 15 for Lynn Canal. Prince William Sound, look for northwest winds at 30 knots tomorrow with 4-foot seas. Small craft advisories for the North Gulf Coast. East side, northwest 25, and then west 30 knots for the western North Gulf Coast, as well as the Barren Islands. Southeast 25, Kamishak Bay, Cook Inlet, lighter winds tomorrow, west 20, south of the Forelands, and northern Cook Inlet, northeast of 15. Those will pick up once again on Wednesday, northeast 30 knots, and gales for the areas south of the Forelands, and then southerlies at 45 knots, Kamishak Bay, south winds 40 knots for the Barren, southeast 40 for the western North Gulf Coast, and storm warnings there in Prince William Sound. East winds 50 knots, seas 12 feet, and southeast winds 50 knots for the Middleton Island zone with 17-foot seas. Kodiak Island tomorrow, west-southwest 25 to 30 knots, and then Sitkanack to Castle Cape, gale warnings south 35, storm warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, southerly winds 50 to 55 knots, seas 20 to 24 feet, and southeast winds 40 knots for Bristol Bay, seas 10 feet. Outlook for Wednesday, Kodiak Island, gales west-southwest 35 to 40 knots. Let's see. Alaska Peninsula, west 25 to 30 knots, and for the Bristol Bay area, west 30. And, excuse me, storm warnings for the Fox Islands tomorrow, south to southwest, 50 to 55 knots, seas as high as 32 feet, and gales for Adak and Atco, westerly 35 to 40 knots, and 35 to 40 knot winds actually extend all the way out to Shimei and Attu. For Wednesday, west winds 40 knots, Shimei to Amchitka. Minimum gales out of the west at 35 knots for Adak and Atka. Small craft advisories for the eastern Aleutians there. For Unalaska Island, southwest 25. Unmac Island, west at 30 knots. Storm warnings out for the southwest coast tomorrow. Southerlies 50 knots, seas 20 to 23 feet. Storm warnings for St. Lawrence Island, southeast 50 knots. And the Pribilof Islands, storm warnings, southeast 55 knots, 31-foot seas, 45-knot winds for St. Matthew Island, Norton Sound, southeast at 40. And for Wednesday, those come down considerably there. West 20 for Norton Sound, southwest 20 St. Lawrence Island. Small craft advisories along the southwest coast, west-southwest 25 to 30 knots. Gales for St. Matthew Island of 35 knots from the southwest, 30 knots southwesterlies for the Pribilofs. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast for tomorrow. East winds 15 knots. Brisk wind advisory on the central coast of those 25-knot winds. And then small craft advisories on the west side. Just under gales, east at 30. And then we've got gale warnings from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, easterlies 40 knots. Storm warnings from Cape Thompson to Wales, east winds 50 knots, 14-foot seas. Those will drop down to gale force on Wednesday and become more southeasterly from Wales to Cape Thompson. And then Cape Thompson, Cape Beaufort, east 30. Gale warnings, central and western Arctic coast, east winds 35 knots. Brisk wind advisories on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for east winds at 30 knots. Looking at tonight's weather, again, that intense storm starts to weaken and slide southeastward, and that'll keep gale warnings going along the coastal areas of the Panhandle. Begin to lighten up considerably, as they are starting to do now for the North Gulf Coast. And it stays heaviest precipitation southern Panhandle. And then let me back that up, tomorrow the next system out there in the west pushes into the coast with strong winds, and then the winter weather warnings there, the winter storm warnings, St. Lawrence Island into the Seward Peninsula and up along the northwest coast. Otherwise, the eastern interior, high pressure, dry, variably cloudy, light winds, rain over the southern Panhandle. Next day, another system brings more rain into the southeast coast. Another front pushes into the...
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.